Normandy, France. June 28th, 1944. 0547 hours. The morning smelled of diesel and wet wool. Sergeant Tom Hargreaves stood beside his Cromwell tank in a hedgerow clearing south of Cannes, one hand on the cold turret steel, the other holding a length of braided fence wire he'd cut from a farmer's gate. Around him, the rest of B Squadron was waking, boots on gravel, the metallic clank of ammunition being loaded, the low rumble of engines turning over in the pre-dawn chill. No one spoke much. They'd lost 2 Cromwells yesterday to a single Tiger that had appeared, fired, and vanished back into the bocage like a ghost made of armour plate. The after-action brief had been brief. Engage faster. Don't get caught reloading. Hargreaves looked at the wire in his hand. Maybe 18 inches long, looped at one end, twisted at the other. His fingers were stained with rust and dirt. He'd been a tenant farmer in Shropshire before the war, the kind of man who fixed gate latches with whatever was in his pocket. Now he was a tank commander, and the problem he faced was brutally simple. His crew could load a 75mm round every 8 to 9 seconds if everything went perfectly. The Tiger they'd faced could do it in 6. That gap, 2, maybe 3 seconds, was the difference between killing and dying. He'd spent the night thinking about loading racks, about how the stored rounds were clipped in place by spring tension, how the loader had to yank each shell free, pivot, shove it home, step back and reach for the next one. Wasted motion, wasted time. The wire in his hand wasn't doctrine, it wasn't in the manual. But doctrine, he thought, hadn't written the manual while staring at the burning wreck of a friend's tank. They expected orders that morning. What they heard was, please. Hargreaves had called his loader over, Private Danny Cole, 19, from Leeds, quick hands but green, and showed him the wire without a word. Cole frowned. "What's that for, Sarge?" "Your thumb," Hargreaves said. He threaded one end of the wire through a bracket on the loader's side of the turret, bent it into a small hook, then looped the other end loosely around the base of the nearest ammunition clip. "When you pull the shell, this pops the next clip forward 1/2 inch. You don't reach, you grab." Cole stared at him. "That's not—" "No, it's not." "Will it work?" Hargreaves didn't answer. He just watched Cole's face, waiting for the moment the younger man understood that the question wasn't, will it work, but do we have a choice? Cole nodded once. "Right, let's rig the rest." The problem had been building since D-Day. The Cromwell, fast, manoeuvrable, equipped with a decent 75mm gun, was designed for pursuit and exploitation, not for the grinding, close-range ambush warfare of the Norman hedgerows. British tank doctrine prized speed and shock, the idea that armour could punch through and race for objectives. But the bocage was a maze of sunken lanes and 12-foot hedges grown. On centuries-old earthen banks, each one a natural firing position. German Panthers and Tigers could sit hull down, invisible, and pick off advancing British tanks at ranges where the Cromwell's gun barely scratched paint. The math was grim. A Tiger, I carried 92 rounds and could sustain a rate of fire that overwhelmed even veteran crews. A Cromwell carried 64 rounds for its main gun, stored in racks along the turret walls and floor. Each rack used spring-loaded clips to keep shells from rattling loose during movement. A sensible design for road marches, a nightmare for rapid fire. The loader had to grip each shell firmly, yank it against spring resistance, then twist and load. 8 seconds per round if he was good, 9 if he fumbled, 10 if he was tired or scared or both. British tank losses in the first 3 weeks post-invasion hovered near 30% in forward units. The after-action reports were clinical. Cromwell outgunned at effective range. Recommend close engagement or indirect fire support. What they meant was, get close enough to hurt them before they kill you, or die trying. Tom Hargreaves had read those reports in a tent lit by a paraffin lamp, and he'd thought about gates, about how a farmer doesn't fight a stuck latch. He rigs it so it doesn't stick. The wire was 14-gauge steel, scavenged from a collapsed pasture fence. Hargreaves cut it into 18-inch lengths using a pair of pliers from his kit. Each piece was bent into a loose J shape, one end hooked through a small bracket he'd spot welded to the turret interior, the other looped around the base of the spring clip on the ammo rack. The physics were dead simple. When the loader pulled a shell free, the wire transferred a tiny amount of that rearward force to the next clip in line, nudging it forward maybe 3/4 of an inch, just enough that the loader's hand met the shell instead of having to search for it. It wasn't automatic, it wasn't powered. It was a loop of fence wire doing what tensioned wire does, pull. Hargreaves installed the first set himself, working by flashlight inside the turret while the rest of the crew slept. His knuckles scraped the traverse gear. He nicked his thumb on a sharp edge and bled onto the loader's mat. When he was done, he sat back and looked at the 4 strands of wire, barely visible in the dim light, and felt the same quiet satisfaction he'd felt fixing a gate that would still be there when his children were grown. At 600 hours, he woke Cole and told him to load and unload 20 rounds timed. Cole's first run, 8 seconds average, with the wire, 6 seconds. They stared at each other in the cramped turret, not quite believing it. Cole whispered, "Jesus, Sarge, that's 2 seconds," Hargreaves said. "Per round. Do it again." Cole did. 6 seconds. Then again. 5.8. Hargreaves climbed out of the tank and stood in the cold morning air, breathing hard, feeling something unfamiliar and fragile rising in his chest. Hope. The first live test came that same afternoon. B Squadron had been tasked with clearing a crossroads east of Villa Bocage, where reconnaissance reported possible enemy armour. Hargreaves' troop, 3 Cromwells, advanced in staggered column, each tank buttoned up, commanders scanning through periscopes. The Bocage pressed in on both sides, dense and green and utterly silent. Then the world cracked open. A panther appeared at 200 yards, turret already traversing. Hargreaves saw the muzzle flash and felt his Cromwell lurch as the German round punched through the hedgerow 6 feet to their left, missing by instinct or luck. He screamed into the intercom, "Gunner! Traverse right! Panther! 2 o'clock!" His gunner, Corporal Eddie Finch, swung the turret. The Panther was moving now, trying to angle its front armour. Finch fired, hit. The round sparked off the glacis plate and ricocheted into the dirt. "Load AP!" Hargreaves shouted. Cole moved. The wire rig did what it was supposed to do. The next shell was there. He slammed it home, called up, and Finch fired again before the Panther could. This time the round caught the Panther's lower hull, penetrating the drive sprocket. The German tank slewed to one side, immobilised. "Load! He!" Cole already had it. 5 seconds. Finch put the high explosive round through the turret ring. The Panther brewed up in a column of black smoke. Hargreaves sat frozen for a moment, his heartbeat loud in his ears. Then he keyed the radio. "Contact destroyed. Cromwell 2, advance and confirm." They'd fired 3 rounds in under 16 seconds against a Panther and lived. That night, the squadron commander, Major Peter Ellis, asked Hargreaves to explain the engagement. Hargreaves showed him the wire. Ellis, a career officer who wore his service ribbons like quiet disappointments, touched one of the loops and said, "This isn't standard." "No, sir." "How fast?" 5 to 6 seconds per round, sir. Consistently." Ellis was silent for a long moment. Then, "Rig it on every Cromwell in the squadron. I want the armourers briefed by morning." Hargreaves blinked. "Sir, it's not." "I don't care if it's not in the manual, Sergeant. I care if it works." If you want to see how a piece of fence wire changed the course of tank warfare in Normandy and why the Germans never saw it coming, subscribe now and hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter of small fixes that won big battles. The ladder of validation moved faster than Hargreaves expected. Within 48 hours, every Cromwell in B Squadron had been retrofitted. The regimental armourers, Warrant Officer Hughes, a Welshman with 30 years of service and scepticism for anything invented after 1935, inspected the first installation, grunted and said, "Farmers." But he certified the modification as field expedient and non-interference with primary systems. By July 3rd, the entire 7th Armoured Division had received a technical bulletin, mimeographed and distributed by hand, ammunition handling efficiency improvement, Type C wire assist. It didn't mention Hargreaves by name. It didn't need to. By mid-July, training officers at forward depots were teaching replacement crews to install the wire assist before their first combat patrol. A lieutenant from the Reconnaissance Corps wrote in his diary, "New loader trick, W wire, shaves seconds off everything. Feels wrong to rig it yourself like we're admitting the factory got it wrong. But it works. God, does it work." The numbers were undeniable. Cromwell crews equipped with the wire rig sustained an average rate of fire 35% faster than unmodified tanks in the same engagements. In one documented action near Caen on July 8th, a single Cromwell troop engaged and destroyed 2 Panthers and damaged a Tiger I in under 4 minutes. 18 main gun rounds expended, 15 hits recorded. The German tanks had expected the standard rhythm: shoot, wait for the Cromwell to reload, reposition, shoot again. Instead, they faced a stuttering drumbeat of fire that gave them no time to manoeuvre. A captured German tank commander, interviewed by British intelligence in late July, was asked why his unit had withdrawn from a favourable position during a recent engagement. His answer, recorded in the interrogation log: "Their timing stopped working. We could not predict when they would fire. It was like fighting a different tank." That was the secret the wire carried. Not just speed, but unpredictability. Doctrine is rhythm. Rhythm is confidence. Break the rhythm, and confidence shatters. The institutional irony was sharp enough to draw blood. The wire assist violated Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the Cromwell Technical Manual, which explicitly forbade field modifications to ammunition storage systems without approval from the Royal Armoured Corps Technical Authority. The penalty for non-compliance was technically a court-martial. In practice, no one mentioned it. The modifications spread through the armoured regiments like a rumour, passed along by word of mouth and sketched diagrams on the backs of requisition forms. Tom Hargreaves was never formally recognised for the innovation. His name appeared in no commendation, no medal citation, no technical patent. The official record credited field expedient improvements developed through collective unit initiative, which is military bureaucracy's way of saying someone did something brilliant and we don't want to admit we didn't think of it first. But among the crews, the story travelled. Sergeant Hargreaves, the farmer who fixed his tank with fence wire because he knew how to fix a gate. There was no parade, no ceremony. Just a quiet current of respect that moved through the tank parks and maintenance bays, the kind of recognition that matters more than medals because it comes from the people who know what it costs. Major Ellis did submit a commendation. It was quietly filed and forgotten. Years later, a historian would find it in an archive box labelled Miscellaneous Field Reports Summer 1944 and wonder why no one had followed up. The human ripples were smaller, stranger, more intimate. Corporal Eddie Finch, Hargreaves' gunner, wrote to his wife in August, "We have a new trick for loading shells. I can't explain it in a letter, but it means Danny doesn't have to work as hard and I get to shoot faster. Tom figured it out. He's the kind of man who could fix a watch with a nail and a prayer. I'm glad he's the one giving the orders." Private Danny Cole, who'd been green and frightened in June, became one of the fastest loaders in the division. By September, he was training replacement crews, demonstrating the wire assist with the casual authority of someone who'd survived long enough to teach. He never forgot the night Hargreaves had shown him the first loop of wire and said please instead of ordering. It changed the way he thought about rank, about respect. There was tension, too. A few older crews resisted the modification, viewing it as an admission that they'd been doing it wrong all along. A tank commander in A Squadron, Captain Geoffrey Reeves, Sandhurst-educated, stiff with propriety, refused to allow the wire assist on his Cromwell, insisting that proper drill and discipline were sufficient. His loader, a quiet man named Hutchins, installed it anyway one night while Reeves was at a briefing. The next day, during contact with a German rearguard, Reeves said nothing. After the engagement, he found Hutchins and said, "Thank you." It was the only time anyone heard him apologise. A photograph circulated through the tank regiments that summer, a Cromwell turret interior, the wire rigs visible along the ammo racks, and a hand-lettered sign taped above the loader's station that read, "Shropshire Gate Caimdas, Eston, 1944. Someone had drawn a cartoonish sheep in the corner. The humour was dry, tired, profoundly British, a way of saying we're still here and we're figuring it out. The cultural shift was quieter than the tactical one, but just as real. For 3 years, British tankers had absorbed the narrative that German armour was superior, better guns, thicker armour, more advanced optics. The propaganda didn't say it outright, but the subtext was corrosive. You're outmatched, so be clever, be brave, and try not to die. The wire assist didn't erase that imbalance, but it changed the emotional calculus. It proved that small, unglamorous ingenuity could beat engineering excellence, that a sergeant with pliers and a piece of fence wire could do what the factories and design bureaus hadn't. There was no grand announcement, no speech from a general, just a slow collective realisation that spread through the armoured divisions like dawn. We're not just surviving anymore, we're adapting. We're winning. A chaplain attached to the 7th Armoured Division noted in his journal, "The men seem lighter this week. Not happy, no one is happy. Here, but less burdened. They joke more. I think it's because they believe they have a chance now. That's worth more than 100 Shermans. The Germans noticed too. Signals intelligence intercepted a radio conversation between two Panther commanders in early August discussing an engagement near Falaise. One of them said, "The Cromwells are different now, faster. We can't rely on reload intervals anymore." The other replied, "Someone is teaching them tricks." They had no idea it was a farmer with a piece of wire. This is the kind of story they don't put in textbooks. The small human innovations that change the calculus of war. If you're finding value in this, let me know by liking this video and sharing it with someone who loves history that actually happened. The aftermath unfolded slowly, the way all systemic changes do. By September 1944, the wire assist had been formally incorporated into the Cromwell maintenance checklist, not as a mandated modification, but as an approved field expedient, which meant crews could install it without fear of reprimand. Armoured regiments returning to Britain for refit brought the technique home, where it was quietly added to the training curriculum at the Royal Armoured Corps schools. The innovation spread laterally too. Loaders on Churchill tanks experimented with similar tension assist rigs for their ammunition storage, though the Churchill's layout required a different approach: washers and springs instead of wire. Sherman crews in British service tried it and found limited benefit. The American tank's ready rack system was already optimised differently. But the principle held: small, intelligent friction reduction could yield tactical advantage. Tom Hargreaves survived the war. He was promoted to warrant officer in October 1944 and served with the 7th Armoured Division through the Rhine crossing and into Germany. He never spoke much about the wire assist, deflecting credit whenever it came up. "Wasn't just me," he'd say. "Danny did the loading, Eddie did the shooting, I just made it a bit easier." After demobilisation in 1946, he went home to Shropshire and took over the tenancy of the farm he'd left 4 years earlier. He fixed gates, mended fences, and raised 2 daughters who never quite understood why visiting tank veterans would sometimes stop by, shake their father's hand, and say simply, "Thank you for the wire, Sarge." The modification itself faded from official memory. Post-war technical reviews of the Cromwell mentioned field improvements to ammunition handling efficiency, in footnotes if at all. By the 1950s, as newer tanks with autoloaders and revised stowage systems entered service, the wire assist became a historical curiosity, something old sweats mentioned in pubs, a minor footnote in the long catalogue of battlefield innovation. But in the turrets, among the men who'd used it, the memory stayed sharp. It wasn't about the wire, it was about what the wire represented, the idea that you didn't have to accept the tools you were given, that a problem could be solved not with more steel or bigger guns, but with observation, thought, and 18 inches of braided fence wire. There's a larger lesson woven into this, something that resonates beyond tank combat and hedgerow ambushes. Modern military doctrine prizes complexity, advanced systems, integrated networks, precision munitions, and those things matter. But the wire assist is a reminder that advantage often lives in the margins. In the 2 seconds saved, the motion eliminated, the small friction reduced. The German tanks weren't defeated by wonder weapons. They were defeated by incremental improvements, stacked and compounded, that added up to a survivable edge. The innovation also highlights a tension that exists in every rigid hierarchy, the gap between what doctrine prescribes and what reality demands. Tom Hargreaves didn't ask permission to break the rules. He understood that survival was a higher authority than procedure. The officers who allowed the wire assist to spread, Major Ellis, Warrant Officer Hughes, even Captain Reeves after his grudging acceptance, demonstrated a kind of institutional humility that's rarer than valour, the ability to admit that good ideas come from unexpected places. And there's something quietly profound about the fact that the solution came from a farmer. Not an engineer, not a staff officer, a man who spent his life fixing things with whatever was at hand, who understood that the best tools are often the simplest, that elegance is just another word for works every time. The wire didn't win the war, but it changed the odds for the men who fought it, and in the brutal arithmetic of survival, that was everything. If this story reminded you that the biggest victories sometimes come from the smallest innovations, and that history is built by people who refuse to accept that's just how it is, subscribe to this channel. There are dozens more stories like this, and I'll keep bringing them to you as long as you keep watching. Normandy, France. June 28th, 1944. A sergeant stands beside his tank in the pre-dawn chill, holding a piece of fence wire and thinking about gates. Around him, the war grinds on. Diesel smoke, cold steel, the weight of doctrine and the lightness of hope. He doesn't know yet that this small thing will ripple outward, that it will save lives and change battles and outlast his name in the memory of the men who matter. But he knows this. A gate that sticks is a problem. A wire that bends is a solution. Sometimes the difference between defeat and victory is nothing more than a farmer who knows how to make things work.